look at that, man. You can have through that.
Well, they got them in the canteen. They got a drink shop. How much are they?
You have VAT, mate.
Oh, look at that. I've got £1.04.
Have you?
Is it giving change?
No, thank you very much.
No. Oh, you don't want cobblers. Cheers, ready? Right, we'll go.
What's this one? No. No, just pick them up, throw them together and staple it in the back.
No, because they say pretty much this will be like 5 minutes. So definitely you want to stick with these questions.
That's what we did last year.
What, stuck something in the back of the on-site guide?
Yeah, that's what we did.
I've never done that.
Yeah. Map was about that big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how long will you shake it and nothing will fall off from your on-site guide? You're right.
Do you guys know, I know there's 30 questions in the exam and you pass it, but do you know how many questions there are in total?
60.
30 out of 60, yeah?
Is it 60, isn't it? I don't know.
James, how many questions are there in the exam at all? 60, it says 2 minutes.
Well, no, there's 60 marks total.
No, you're thinking 60 marks in total.
Marks and something.
No? I thought it was 60.
60, I'm sure you're right. I'm sure he said there's 60 questions, you get 2 minutes. 2 minutes, isn't it? 2 minutes per question.
So
Or it
2
might
hour
be 2
exam.
minutes per mark.
We'll ask James.
It's a 2-hour exam.
It might be, because if you think there's a design question that's got 15 marks, you won't be able to do that in 2 minutes. So it must be 2 minutes per mark.
Yeah.
So that design question will probably take you 30, should take you 30
The
minutes.
idea is that there's a bunch of questions that will take you 10 seconds to do. They're common sense questions, so that makes up the time for the design question.
I'm sure it's 2 minutes a mark.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
1 hour. Cannot go out.
So that's why they give you the easy questions to make up the hard questions.
Sorry, Jay. We have a big problem here.
You have a big problem.
Yeah. Sorry, the actual exam, how many questions there are?
There is about 21 questions.
21 questions.
21 questions. It's worth 75 marks in total.
And is it 2 minutes per mark? So if there was
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah.
You get 2 hours, so it's a little bit less than that. Okay. The reality is, if you focus on the design question, which is the last question in the book, and then you get onto this one, you can then start to cherry pick the others, start getting you through. But what you must try and do in that time is you must try and give an answer to every question to give you a higher chance of passing. Okay. This is similar to what you'll get in the exam. It does go into a bit more detail because they don't normally ask for the phase angle. Okay, but I thought I'd chuck that in there just to see if you were listening. And also, if I take it a bit further, it should hopefully make the actual exam easier.
And it's a 2 hour exam.
2 hour exam, and it's on the 1st of April, so it's not an April Fool's. Might feel like it, and it starts at 9:30 in the morning. Okay.
And we are then 18th edition qualified.
No, that's a separate qualification.
Do we get that?
Not as part of this course, but we are running that in about January time. I'll get the course code up and you can apply for it online. It's £203 something.
I thought we was getting that.
Huh?
Yeah, we can do it.
You can, yeah.
It's only them.
It's not a funded course. It is one that if you want to do it, everyone has to pay for it. Okay.
Do we get a discount?
Do you think?
You could even get a discount on the whole course.
Sorry, Jay, but how do, from your opinion, what do you think it's best to concentrate on this exam and to do 18th edition after?
So the 18th edition is only 7 weeks long. Okay.
Yeah, but I say because it's.
Which day is that going to be on? Sorry.
That'll be on a Thursday night. Okay, Thursday night. It's online.
What, it's not in class?
It's a multiple choice exam. Okay, the reality is the more practice you have with multiple choice papers, it's about finding the information in the book. The 18th edition accompanies what you're doing now. The reality is with it is when you do it, it's about finding the answers. You've got a chapter in this exam which has, I think, like 4 questions just on the 18th edition. And it's the same thing of it's finding the answers in there. So if you do the course as well as this,
I mean, there's
it goes hand in hand.
tell you where everything is anyway.
That's it. Okay.
Do you know when the 19th edition is coming out?
No, we're not.
No, not for years.
Amendment.
We've got the Second Amendment comes out in March.
So, the question is, if we did the 18th edition in January,
So you can be,
we'd have to do the amendment.
no, you can be an amendment behind,
Okay.
but you can't be an edition behind. So where everyone's 17th edition qualified and everything like that, they've had to do the 18th. Okay, but I did the 17th edition amendment 1 when I did my 18th edition. I never did the other exam till the 18th edition came out because you've got your 17th edition.
Yeah, so you can be an amendment, but not an addition.
Yeah, you can be an amendment but not an addition behind. All depends what mood the NIC or NAPIT inspectors in to what they want to see.
So what's the difference between doing your test and spec course and your 2391?
They're the same.
So they're the same thing.
Oh, they are the same.
Yeah, the 239152, which is what we run, is combined inspection testing and periodic inspection.
Right, okay.
That one I would recommend leaving till next year.
Yeah.
Because that is a lot of work to get
The
you
only
through.
reason I ask is because I've heard people say I've done my test and inspect and my 2391. So that led me to believe it was
There is, but not many people tend to do it. There is a level 2 initial verification.
Wouldn't it be worth doing the MBQ first?
Depends what position you're in. If
you have your
you're
test-
doing really well with academically right now, I would recommend next year you go and do your inspection testing because it's all fresh in your mind from this year. Okay? Because it's only a short course of 15 weeks, the inspection testing. Whereas your MVQ can be anything from 3 months to
So is the
2 years.
MBQ only really just the golden like sites to get?
It's to get your gold card.
Get your gold card, which lets you on. So if you're doing just like domestic maintenance, and all that
Most companies won't ask for it, but the thing is that if you want to go further in the industry and become like a QS, the new rules for the QS are that you should have your gold card.
So I'm not really fussed about the NVQ. I'll be quite happy with the 18th edition, the test inspect, level 2 and 3.
Yeah, because it can get you out on site.
Yeah.
It can get you out earning money. The reality is you can go earn 50. You can go do periodic testing for big companies, £50 a test. Do 4 a day, you got £200. Do 5, you get £250.
Alright, so once you got the 3 and you get, say, your 18th and you test and inspect, where do you go to then find the job? Like, what do you...
Agencies, companies who are advertising all over the place.
So I'm on a few agencies, and there's not a lot that ask for a gold card, they just want an ECS card.
Yeah, but what's the wages? Because once you show them the gold card, then they have to pay you your rate.
Only if they're a JIB registered company.
If they recognise the gold card. Well, if I had a gold card and I showed it to the agency and they were like, oh, I don't
always get you
recognise it, I'd be like, well, I'm not working for you.
Yeah, but then if you get out on site and say I've got a gold card and they give you a task to do and you can't do it, you'll be fucked up.
But that's what the gold card means. If you've got it, you can do it.
But it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
You're supposed to be able to because you're supposed to have done
Yeah,
your
but this
MVQ.
is where we were talking before, where people do these short courses for like 9-10 weeks. They get a gold card and they go out on site. We had it out on our site. The guy come in with a gold card. The site manager asked him to sit down and design a way of running the light in the warehouse. He sat there for 3 hours and he could do it. And he got told to go.
You get paid.
He done one of these short courses. He's got one of these short courses. He's got a bit of paper that says I've got a gold card. But when you come and do it on site, he didn't have
To be honest, I think when I did my MVQ, I don't think I could have designed a circuit.
But he didn't have to design it. They just asked him how he was going to wire it.
Oh, okay.
But what I'm thinking is they told him to get off the site, so he went off the site and then he got a job somewhere else and they paid him the rate.
Yeah, but that's if he can do the work.
That's
if he
it,
can
a
physically
gold-
do the work.
Yeah.
A JIB, a gold card does not ensure you can physically do the work.
But what work are you doing? Are you designing power stations?
No, but
someone else.
I know on the
If-
site,
if
you
you're-
know, lighting.
That's what I'm
if
doing.
you're asked to go on site, you'll get paid £250 a day. These people are expecting you to get your tools out and be able to do any task they've asked you to do.
That's what
But they've had it so many times where people turn up with a gold card. Right, how have you got any fucking tools?
And he's literally said he'd done a quick training course.
No, he just said I've got a gold card. But he ain't got any fucking tools. He didn't know how to wire up.
No, I've seen that in the
That sheet I've just handed out as homework, I did ask you to have a go.
I was going to go down that road, and then I got slated on that road, so I ain't going on that one again.
Has everyone managed to have a go at calculating this? Have you all checked your answers? You need to go through it? Yeah. You need to go through it?
Every day.
Don't get hung up on having the gold card because
I want it.
but
That's
if
my.
you can't do the work on site, you won't last long.
But you pay me.
I hate moving.
So the apparent power is
I can do
calculated
the
by
work.
voltage times by current,
You've got to back it up, and
which will give us 230 times by 5
you
amps,
can't. And
which
there's a
will give
lot
us
of people out there that can't.
1,155
They've
voltage
got gold
amperes.
cards, they get fucked off site.
Does that make sense? No.
And you won't get paid.
Why not?
Because people aren't going to pay you standing around. That's fine.
You could put KVA, because it's 1,000, you could divide it. You'd still get the same marks, because it's still the same answer, isn't it?
A lot of people don't give a fuck about your
That's
gold
fine.
card.
It's still
as long
correct,
as you've got
isn't
an
it?
ECS card, and you can do.
Okay, remember, when you do,
And you can
it's
do
still
the work.
a correct answer. As long as
Because
you don't
forget, a
go
lot
and
of people,
put,
even if you're
if
going
you
to
wrote
an
it like
agency, they
this,
still want
as
references
long as you didn't put KVA,
from your
you're
previous
fine.
supplier, previous employers,
Okay?
or previous
It's the same
agencies.
thing, isn't it? Same number, same thing, you still get the same marks.
If you learn all of this and you go get a job changing light bulbs, which some
What's
people
this?
do,
What's his name here?
you forget about all this.
Yeah.
Then you go on site and then you don't know.
City
You're
Guilds
outside,
of London.
All this is done for you.
I did not create this. This is
It's
their
all in the spec.
stuff.
It's all done for you. They'll tell you what cables you need to
I know.
install,
Okay.
where
Yeah,
you're
everything
running
you
them.
have on the
But
drawing.
don't blame me for their PowerPoints. It's not me. Honestly, go. Okay.
I've seen
So to get our
problems.
true power, it's voltage times by
I've
cosine
seen problems.
times by current.
Problems are always
Okay,
on site.
which gives us
Design's changed.
977.5
Building's
watts,
changed.
or
I've been
0.97
on sites
kilowatts.
where they built
Okay.
a wall, and then someone's got to say, actually, I don't like that wall there.
Right.
So you've got to take
And the last one is doing the Pythagoras theorem.
But they'll pay you
Okay.
to rip out all the old cables, all the
Are you
old
happy with that?
equipment, and start again.
Right.
Building sites never go to plan, never.
I'm not going to go through example 4. You can have a look at that one at home. Okay. So, what causes our power factor, our power loss? Okay.
Magnetic field in the ballast.
Magnetic fields in the ballast. We've got transformers. The coil of wire. Not for this. Okay. That will cause a resistance issue, but not when we're looking at power factor. Okay.
And after that, if you need
Fluorescent luminaires, anything with that coil of wire will cause us to have a loss of power. Okay?
high level, we change those.
Any questions on
They
this?
will pay you.
Okay? To help us correct this, so we can see this is how a fluorescent luminaire is actually wired inside itself. Okay? We have the ballast, also known as the choke. Okay, that's our inductive load in this example, isn't it? Okay? So to correct this inductive load, this coil of wire, we put across the supply terminals a power factor correcting capacitor. Okay?
A
That
starter.
has-
A starter.
The starter goes at the top.
Oh, okay.
Okay? If you remember, the starter is just a bit of a switch there, isn't it?
I thought that was a capacitor, the
No,
starter.
it's a switch.
Yeah?
Okay, the way, so, just so you know, the way this works, okay, we bring current in, it comes to the ballast. Current starts to flow through that coil, okay, it creates a magnetic field inside this coil, doesn't it? Okay, that magnetic field will get quite large. It will create a back current which is going to create our power factor, our loss. Okay, the current will flow through the other side of the ballast and it will come up to the cathode. The cathode acts as a heating element inside the fluorescent tube. Okay, that heating element will heat up the mercury vapor inside the tube. Okay. As this is cold, there's not a low enough resistance to allow the current to flow through to get to this end. So what happens is, it comes up and it goes through this starter. What I was always told was to call it a starter switch, because that's what it is. The starter contains a bimetallic plate. Okay, bimetallic plates are two pieces of metal that when produced to heat, they expand at different rates, which causes them to bend. Okay, so the idea is that as it warms up, it causes the metal plates to bend away. So without that being warm, what happens is the current flows through and comes down to the cathode at the other end of the tube. So it's heating that mercury vapor at both ends of the tube. Okay, then the current comes down to the neutral. That's the complete circuit. So with that starter switch in there, when the current warms up that bimetallic plate as it runs through, it causes it to disconnect and break the circuit. Okay? We have a large magnetic field that's been created here. So a magnetic field, that's large magnetic energy. Okay? Scientific principle, energy can't be destroyed or created. It can only be changed form. Okay?
Newton.
So that large magnetic energy has to go somewhere.
Okay? So what happens is that energy transfers through the cable and tries to bridge through the fluorescent tube. That's what you see when it strikes. If it's not warm enough yet to bridge that gap, by the time it strikes across, the starter would have cooled down. Okay? Which is why you see it flicker through a few times before it starts up sometimes, because of how cold the mercury vapor is. Okay? So once it's striked across, okay, the longer the current flows through the fluorescent tube, the lower the resistance actually becomes in that tube. Okay? So if the resistance goes down, what happens to current flow?
Goes up.
Goes up. It does the opposite, doesn't it? So this is why most people refer to this as a choke. Okay? Because it's self-balancing. Okay? Think about it like this. So the resistance here has now gone down in this tube. Okay? So if the resistance goes down, it starts to draw more current through. What happens to the magnetic field inside this coil? More current flow goes into that coil. What happens to that magnetic field? It gets stronger, doesn't it? So we create a larger back-feeding current in here, don't we? So the more current trying to go into the fluorescent tube, the larger the amount of current that it's going to create going back. So it chokes the current to limit the amount of current that can go through the ballast. That's why most people refer to it as a choke, because it's self-choking. Okay? That's what stops it from allowing this to draw loads and loads of current and end up blowing itself up. Okay? Is the fact that the ballast and choke will actually reduce the current flow down. Okay, does that make sense? So because of all that energy that's being used and wasted in the ballast and choke, we put a capacitor in to correct the power factor, to help us draw it from being a big power factor to now being a smaller power factor, to make it more efficient, so it uses more energy efficiently. Okay, if you remember the pint glass that I drew out, it reduces that kVAR to a very small amount, so there's less wasted energy in the system. Okay, does that make sense? Perfect. Okay, so that's just another picture to show. Okay, we've got the ability to either put a capacitor in each load item. Okay, so if you think about it, when you buy a fluorescent light fitting for home, it has a load correction in it because it has a capacitor in it, doesn't it? Okay, what you could do is if you're doing a massive industrial building, you can do bulk correction. That's where you have one lighting circuit and there'll be only one capacitor for the whole circuit. There'll be one big capacitor to do the whole run.